How y'all doing today? My name is Brian Bell. I'm the lead editor of Images Magazine. As y'all didn't know, we have a literary arts magazine on campus. Images. You can submit the images. If you go online, you go on submittable images, and you can submit your work. We take poetry, we take short fiction. So hopefully, from some of the reading that you'll hear today, you'll be inspired to put that pen to that paper. So today I'll be introducing Mr. Yuri Herrera. He was born in Octopan, Mexico. He received his BA in political science at the University of Autonomous Mexico. I had to look that one. He got an MFA in creative writing at the University of Texas at El Paso, and a PhD at the University of California at Berkeley. A very accomplished writer. It's great to have him here on campus. Some of his novels include Trabajos del Reino, which won the Premio Binacional de Novela Joven in 2003. And also he has written 3 novels, all of them translated into several languages. So that shows you the accomplishment right there, which is pretty awesome. Kingdom Cons, Signs Preceding the End of the World, and Transmigration of Bodies, which you'll hear some excerpts of that today. So right now he's also an associate professor at Tulane here, and a really good writer. I hope y'all listen and maybe get inspired a little bit. So without further ado, Mr. Yuri Herrera.
Morning. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for having me here. I'm really happy to finally get to be in Delgado. I have been wanting to be here for a long time now. I have been for 7 years in New Orleans, and I consider this one of my homes. This is like my second home now. I'm going to read excerpts from 2 of my books, and afterwards, if you want, we can have a conversation. The first one is from, the first 2 is from my body, Transmigration of Bodies, from my novel, Transmigration of Bodies. I will read the first 2 pages, but still later on I'm going to explain a little bit more about the plot. A scurvy thirst awoke him, and he got up to get a glass of water. But the tap was dry, and all that trickled out was a thin stream of dank hair. Eyeing the third mezcal on the table with venom, he got the feeling it was going to be an awful day. He had no way of knowing it already was. Had been for hours, truly awful. Much more awful than the private little inferno he built himself on roofs. He decided to go out. He opened his door, was disconcerted not to see the scamper of La Ñora, who'd lived there since the days when the big house was actually a big house and not 2 floors of little houses. Rooms or folks half down under lock. And then opened the front door and walked out. The second he took a step, his back pricked to tell him something was off. He knew he wasn't dreaming because his dreams were so unremarkable. If ever he managed to sleep several hours in a row, he dreamt. But his dreams were so lifelike, they provided no rest. Only small variations on his everyday undertakings and his everyday conversations and everyday fears. Occasionally, his teeth fell out, but aside from that, it was just everyday stuff. Nothing like this. Buzzing, then a dense block of mosquitoes tethering themselves to a puddle of water as though attempting to lift it. There was no one, nothing, not a single voice, not one sound on an avenue that by that time should have been rammed with cars. Then he looked closer. The puddle began at the foot of a tree, like someone had leaned up against it to vomit. And what the mosquitoes were sucking up wasn't water, but blood. And there was no wind. Afternoons it blew like a bitch, so there should have been at least a light breeze. Yet, all he got was stagnation, solid lethargy. Things felt much more present when they looked so abandoned. He closed the door and stood there for a second, not knowing what to do. He returned to his room and he stood there too, staring at the table and the bed. He sat on the bed. What worried him most was not knowing what to fear. He was used to fending off the unexpected, but even the unexpected had its limits. You could trust that when you opened the door every morning, the world wouldn't be emptied of people. This, though, was like falling asleep in an elevator and waking up with the doors open on a floor you never knew existed. One thing at a time, he said to himself. First, water. Then we'll figure out what the fuck. Water. He pricked up his nose and turned attentive to look around the place again and then said aloud, of course. He got up, went into the bathroom with a glass, pulled the lid of the tank and saw barely three fingers. He'd gotten up in the night to piss and the tank hadn't refilled after he flushed. He scraped the bottom with the glass, but there was only enough for half. One drop of water was all that was left in his body, and it had picked a precise place on his temple to bore its way out. Fuck it, he said. Since when do I believe these bastards? So this guy, who in the English version is called the Redeemer, when he's talking about those bastards, he's talking about the government, who is saying that there is an epidemic. Nobody knows exactly what is going on. So this story is about this guy who wants to go outside, who wants to be inside, but he has to go outside. He wants to be inside because there's a woman with whom he finally has the chance to get it on. But he has to go outside because he is like a fixer, a guy who is just doing stuff with other people. And the main thing in this story is that he has to exchange bodies between two families that are in a sort of turf war. But anyway, before going out, he finally gets to talk to this woman who is called in this novel the 3 times blonde. And before the thing that he wants to happen happens, or not, he realizes that there is one really serious problem. Where's the condom? Motherfucker condom. He'd asked himself the same thing and had answered himself, don't fucking worry about it right now. He put his pants back on, said, don't move. He stepped into the hall barefoot. The anemic student was nowhere to be seen. He ran into his apartment, reciting the prayer of the overheated corridor. Oh please, oh please, oh please. May he the drunken me. May he the dumb fuck me. May he the me who never, ever, ever knows where the shit is. May he have saved one, gassed one, lubricated or corrugated, colored or flavored, magnum or tight fit. Oh please, call this name of hormones. Gradually gets one time. But he knew there was none. He'd used the prayer the last time, months ago, and managed to unearth one under the bed, gleaming and glorious as a national hero. The very last one. This was not a time for heroes or miracles. Fear was what had granted him these hours of intimacy, but now it was showing its virulent side. Go on, off to the shop, Lady Kid. Anyway, so he has to go out, and then he will find these other horrible things happening in the city. I just want to say one more thing about this passage. That when I had a Twitter account, now I don't have one because I got sick of being angry with people I don't know all the time. But when I had a Twitter account, one day some person wrote to me and said, I just wanted to let you know that yesterday I used that prayer and it worked. So I think that is my best literary achievement. That I helped someone to have sex and safe sex, which is even better. So it's there for you if you want to use it. So now I'm going to read three a little bit longer excerpts from Science Preceding the End of the World. And by the way, I want to say that these books were translated by Lisa Dillman, which is a translator working in Emory in Atlanta. And I always want to say that because the work of translators very often is not well recognized, and it's never well paid, and it's something really, really hard to do. And I have realized that, especially with my books, because I come up with a lot of words that I just make up, or that I get from really old text, or from really specific slangs in Mexico. I realize that that sometimes translators hate me a little bit because it's really tough, and I always want to give credit. So Lisa Dillman is the one who has translated all my novels, and I think she has done a great job. So the first one is the first 2 pages of the first chapter. I'm dead, Makina said to herself when everything lowered. A man with a cane was crossing the street. A dull groan suddenly surged through the asphalt. The man stood still as if waiting for someone to repeat the question, and then the earth opened up beneath his feet. It swallowed the man, and with him a car and a dog. All the oxygen around, and even the screams of passers-by. I'm dead, Makina said to herself. And hardly had she said it, then her whole body began to contest the burden, and she flayed her feet frantically backward, each step mere inches from the sinkhole, until the precipice settled into a perfect circle, and Makina was saved. Slippery bitch of the city, she said to herself, always about to sink back into the cellar. This was the first time that Eric's insanity had affected her. The little town was riddled with bullet holes and tunnels bored by 5 centuries of voracious silver lust. And from time to time, some poor soul accidentally discovered what a half-assed job they'd done of covering them over. A few houses had already been sent back into the underworld, as had a soccer pitch, and have an empty school. These things always happen to someone else, until they happen to you, she thought. She had a quick peek over the precipice, empathized with the poor soul on his way to hell. Happy trails, she said without irony, and then muttered, best be on with a night errand. Her mother, Cora, had called her and said, go and take this paper to your brother. I don't like to send you, child, but who else can I trust it to? A man? Then she hugged her and held her there on her lap, without drama or tears, simply because that's what Cora did. Even if you were 2 steps away, it was always as if you were on her lap, snuggled between her brown bosoms in the shade of her fat, white neck. She only had to speak to you for you to feel completely safe. And she'd say, go to the little town, talk to the top dogs, make nice, and they'll lend a hand with you. So Makina, she goes on this trip to an unnamed other side to look for her brother that supposedly is trying to recover some land that was stolen from her family. And this is one of the things that happens to her when she takes a bus that is taking her to the border. 2 men ogled her in the bus ticket line. One pushed his face close as he passed and said, Lucky's my middle name. He didn't brush against her, but he felt her up with his breath as another bitch. Makina wasn't used to that sort of thing. Not that she hadn't experienced it, she just hadn't let herself get used to it. She'd either tell him to fuck right off or decide not to waste her time on such sex. That's what she decided this time, but not because she was used to it. She bought her ticket and boarded the bus. A couple of minutes later, she saw the two men get on. They were hardly more than kids, with their peach fuzz and yearly pride. Since they probably had no notion of the way real adventures rough you up, they must have thought they were pretty slick adventurers. They just leaded each other down the aisle to their seats, a few rows behind McKenna's. But the one who had spoken to her came back and said with a smirk, "Okay, this is me," and sat down beside her. McKenna made no reply. The bus pulled out. Almost immediately, McKenna felt the first come, real quick, as if by accident. But she knew that type of accident. The millimetric gaze of her elbow, grace of her elbow, prefaced ravenous manhandle. She sharpened her peripheral vision and prepared for what must come if the idiot decided to persist. He did. Barely bothering to fake it, he dropped his left hand onto his own left leg, languidly letting it sag onto the seat and brushed her thigh on the way back. No harm intended, of course. McKenna turned to him, stared into his eyes, so he'd know that her next move was no accident. Pressed a finger to her lips, shh, and with the other hand, yanked the middle finger of the hand he touched her with, almost all the way back to an inch from the top of his wrist. It took her 1 second. The adventurer fell to his knees in pain, jabbed into the tight space between his seat and the one in front, and opened his mouth to scream, but before the order reached his brain, McKenna had already insisted, finger to his lips. Shh. She let him get used to the idea that a woman had jacked him up, and then whispered, leaning close, "I don't like being taught by fucking strangers, if you can believe it." The boy couldn't, judging by the way his eyes were bulging. "You crossing over to find the gate?" McKenna asked. The boy nodded emphatically. "Then you'll need everything that you got, won't you? Because you can't cook or pick with your tootsies now, can you?" The boy shook his head no less emphatically. "So," McKenna continued, "listen up. I'm going to let you go, and you are going to call up with your little friend back there. And I swear on all your pain that if you even so much as think about me again, the only thing that Han's going to be good for is wiping gas." The boy opened his mouth, but now it was McKenna who shook her head. "You believe me?" she asked, and as she did so, pressed his finger a little further back. "You don't believe me. You believe me?" Something in the boy's tears told McKenna he believed him. She released him and watched as he staggered back to his seat. She heard him sniveling for a while, and his friend going, "Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit," over and over. In the meantime, she let herself be lulled by the sight of the gray sea fleeing past in the opposite direction. So eventually McKenna goes to the other side, and several things happen to her that changes her somehow. This is a book about transformation and about the fragility of many things, of our identities, of our nations, of our language, about how everything is changing. So this is a moment when something really important has just happened to her, and she encounters this scene. She'd already left the barracks when she heard, "You too, assume the position, you too." She turned and saw a horribly pasty policeman pointing at her. "Are you deaf? Get in line." In a vacant lot full with black water were half a dozen men on their knees staring at the ground. They all were or looked hungry. McKenna took her place beside her. "You think you can just come here and put your feet up without earning it?" said the cop. "Well, I got news for you. Patriots like me are on the lookout, and we're going to teach you some manners. Lesson 1. get used to falling in. You want to come here, fall in and ask permission. You want to go to the doctor, fall in and ask permission. You want to say a fucking word to me, fall in and ask permission. Fall in and ask permission. Civilized. That's the way we do things around here. We don't jump fences, and we don't dig tunnels. Out the corner of her eye, Makina could see the cop's tongue poking out as he talked, all pink and pointy. She could see, too, that even though he didn't draw, he also didn't take his hand off the holster where his gun was. Suddenly, the cop addressed one of the others, the one beside her. What you got there? He took 2 steps toward him and repeated, what you got there? The man was holding on the book and gripped it tighter when the cop came close. He resisted a bit, but finally let him snatch it away. Huh, said the cop, after glancing at it. Poetry. Look here at the educated worker. Comes with no money, no papers, but hey, poems. You're a romantic, a poet, a writer? Looks like we're going to find out. He ripped out one of the last pages, laid it on the book's cover, pulled a pencil from his shirt and gave it all to the man. Right. The man looked up, bewildered. I told you to write and not look at me, you piece of shit. Keep your eyes on the paper and write why you think you are up the creek. Why you think your ass is in the hands of this patriotic officer. Or don't you know what you did wrong? Sure you do. Right. The man pressed the pencil to the paper and began to trace a letter, but his trembling prevented him. He dropped the pencil, picked it up, and tried again. He couldn't compose a single word, just nervous scribble. Makina suddenly snatched the pencil and book away. The cop roared, I didn't tell you to. But he fell silent on seeing that Makina had begun to write with determination. He kept a close watch on her progress, smiling and sardonic the whole time, though he was disconcerted and couldn't hide. Makina wrote without stopping to think which word was better than which other, or how the message was turning out. She wrote 10 lines, and when she was done, she placed the pencil on the book and fixed her gaze upon it. The cop waited a few seconds, then said, "Give me that." Took the sheet of paper and began to read aloud. We are to blame for this destruction. We who don't speak your tongue and don't know how to keep quiet here. We who didn't come by boat, who dirty up your doorsteps with your dust, who break your barbed wire. We who came to take your jobs, who dream of wiping your shit, who long to work all hours. We who filled your shiny, clean streets with the smell of food, who brought you violence you've never known, who delivered your dope, who deserve to be chained by neck and feet. We who are happy to die for you, what else could we do? We, the ones who are waiting for who knows what. We, the dark, the short, the greasy, the shifty, the fat, the anemic. We, the barbarians. The cop had started off in a mock portentous voice, but gradually abandoned the histrionics as he neared the last line, which he read almost in a whisper. After that, he went on staring at the paper as if he'd gotten stuck on the final period. When he finally looked up, his rage or his interest in his captives seemed to have dissolved. He crumpled the paper into a ball and tossed it behind him. Then he looked away, turned his back, spoke over the radio to someone, and took off. Makina stood as soon as the cop had gone, but the others took some time to realize they weren't under arrest. They looked at each other, half glad and half mistrusted. They looked at Makina, but couldn't say anything to her because she'd started walking again, and all they could make out was her silhouette against the sun. Thank you. So, if there are some complaints, questions, or comments, whatever can just stare at each other. I'm good at the staring points. And tell jokes. Yes.
The phrase "the other side" seems to be a theme that is running through most of your readings. What would you, how would you explain the other side?
The other side,
Yeah.
the place where the Makina, the character, is going. Well, the thing is this. One thing that I'd like to do in my books, in the notes specifically, is that I am aware of certain words that if I use them, they will simplify what I'm trying to say. Because there are certain words that work as a code for certain things that the mainstream media or the powers that be or certain version of history or versions of reality have taught us how they are. So, for instance, with this book, those words are border, Mexico, United States, migration, immigration. None of those words are in this book, precisely because when you hear the word immigration, you think that you know what it's describing, and it's just a code word for certain way of looking at a very complex phenomenon. So I also didn't want to talk about the United States, and I didn't want to talk about Mexico, because this is, I think, migrations is one of the big events of our times that is changing the way we understand national states, the way we understand politics, the way we understand our languages. And I didn't want to write a novel that it was just about the relation between Mexico and the United States. That is the model with which I created this story. That was the model that I had in mind when I was thinking about the transformational experience of voyagers. But this is something that goes beyond Mexico and the United States. So the other side, in that sense, it could be seen as the United States. Now, there is at least another way in which I hope that this book can be read. I took as a narrative model for the structure of this novel, a narrative that existed in the Mexica culture, what is usually known as the Aztec culture. And it is that there was a way in which it was explained what happened when you died. You would go to several places. One of those places was the Mictlan, and in order to get to the Mictlan, you would have to go to 9 underworlds. So I used each one of those underworlds, the little that we know about that, because all this was destroyed, as the names for the chapters. So for me, this book could be read as the voyage that this woman is taking to the other side looking for her brother, but also as the voyage of someone who has died and is going to that other side that is the world of the dead, and how she is stripping herself of what makes her a living human being. So anyway, this is just the two ways in which I was thinking about it. What I always say is that once you publish a book, the book is no longer yours. It's the property of every reader, and every reader can do whatever they want with it, including put it in their paper. Well, thank you.
The last passage you read, the Breathe of Barbarians, of course, called upon Breathe of People. I was wondering what you think about civility
civility. No, the thing is this. It would be really easy to say that we are lacking civility. But what I think is that in some other moments when we thought that we had civility, it was just civility between certain elites, and that there's people who have always suffered a lack of civility from certain powers, you know. Right now, I'm just going to talk about something that is really, really close to me. Right now, we are just learning about the kidnapping of children in the border, but this is not a new thing, you know. The United States has a long tradition of kidnapping children from other countries and from other races for different reasons. And the way migrants have been treated here is not new with Trump. It's more apparent with Trump. It's more shameless with Trump. The racism is more explicit, but it's not a new thing. So civility is something that has, or lack of civility is something that has become more apparent, has become more explicit. But I wouldn't say that it's something that is new. It's just that it's more annoying for certain parts of the elites and for certain parts of the media. But and I'm not saying that that is a good thing. I think that even if it's not a new thing, the racism in government, of course it's better when you don't have a president calling the Nazis fine people and calling Mexican rapists, you know, because that just creates an environment in which institutions also start behaving in a way that is condoned from the most powerful person in the country. So yeah, we are lacking civility, but it's deeper than that, you know. It's not just about a semblance of civility. You know, what we. Thanks.
Hi. Well, we have a lot of young people in the audience, and here at Delgado we have a student-run magazine where people publish their work and stuff. So I was wondering if you could tell us about what you feel are fundamental, maybe practices or like mantras or whatever that you feel are helpful to like a budding emerging writer.
Mantras.
Could be. It's one of the many tools.
It's interesting to put it that way. You know, it's different with each story. One of the mantras is, and I don't know if it's good that I share this, but with every book, I really feel that I'm not going to be able to. And I'm always really surprised and feel privileged and fortunate to do this kind of thing, to be able to talk to people about my work, and sometimes to find people that have actually read my work. Because when you're working on a book, or not even on a book, on a short story, or whatever, what happens to me is I don't know if I'm going to finish it. It always feels a little bit ridiculous because there's something a little bit ridiculous about assuming that you have something to tell to the world. And so I never know if I'm going to be able to finish. When I have finished, I'm not sure if it's going to be published. And when it's published, I'm not sure if it's going to be read. There's a lot of good books that are published and nobody reads. So if there is a mantra, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this, but I have to keep trying. I have, and I think that that just being patient is really important. And another thing is there is a very difficult balance to achieve between being self-critical and self-assured. Because you have to be self-critical. And you have to also listen to what other people say about your work when they say like, no, I don't think this works, and I think this is just bad, and I think this is not good writing. You have to listen. But also sometimes you just have to stick to what you think is something important that you have to say, and sometimes people will say this is not good, and you just have to say, you know, like, fuck it, like, this is what I think. And I'm just gonna try, and I'm just gonna keep doing it even if it sounds ridiculous. So how to learn that balance between being self-critical and being really sure of what you're doing, for me is the most difficult thing. And you only achieve that point if you ever achieve it. Just rewriting and just reading and trying to be humble and at the same time assuming that everybody, including you, has something important to say and that you have the right to keep trying to put it out there. I'm not sure if I don't know if that's an answer. Thank you.
With the science at the end of the world, I was wondering, the main character, Makina, is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, is this the first novel that you've written from the perspective of a woman? And what made you decide specifically with this novel?
Well, it's the only novel I have written from the perspective of a woman. It's not my only female character that I have had in it, but it's the only one in which the focus is exclusively from the perspective of a woman. I didn't think about it when I started planning and writing the novel. I didn't think I'm going to write from the perspective of a woman. This is not the way I planned it. I thought about writing about a character who would endure very difficult things and who would have the ability and the skills to overcome these things. And when I was thinking about this as a project, it came like an organic thing, like a natural decision that this would be a woman. And it came to me, and this is something that I have thought about afterwards. I didn't think about it in the moment. Because it has to do with several things. You know, I have lived in 8 different cities. I have always been a privileged migrant because I have never had racist people shooting at me in the border. You know? But I have witnessed a lot of stuff. And I have seen that always the people that have to endure the worst are the women traveling by themselves. In general, we have created a world in which we make things more difficult for women. Everywhere, in school, in the workplace, in the family. And women have to develop more skills than men. And this character is a character that has to adapt all the time to different things that are happening to her. And also, I was lucky enough to grow up surrounded by really strong and talented women. My grandmother was a midwife, and then when she was 58, she decided to go to school, and she became a social worker. And she got on a plane for the first time when she was 75 years old. And she got on a plane again when she was 92 years old to go to Europe. And she was part of a group of nurses way before that, in the 50s, who created a union in a moment in which it was not easy to create a union outside the state apparatus. And then my mom studied medicine in a time when it was not that common that women would study medicine in Mexico. She became an activist, and she was a mom, an activist, and a doctor, and she was not even 30 when she was doing all this. And I got tired just walking my dog. So when I think about this. These women close to me did with their lives, and it's clear to me that it was part of why it was like a natural decision that this really strong, really smart character had to be a woman. But I didn't think about it as a technical thing. I didn't think in craft terms. How would a woman speak? It just came the character as part of the whole world that is happening. I don't know if I can explain this. Yeah. Can you? Yeah.
Could you talk about your revision process?
I don't do much many revisions, and the thing is because I write slowly. You know, my books are just like really thin. I always repeat that every time I start or that I'm clear that I'm doing a new book, I always think that this is gonna be like my war and peace. This one is going to be my 600-page book, and then they end up being 80 pages. And this is because I really think a lot of every single sentence that I'm putting, and I enjoy it. I enjoy doing it slowly. And my revision process, in any case, it's something that I also enjoy a lot because it's sort of a stoner state of mind. It's like when you really focus on every single word and all the connotations and the musicality, but you already have one first draft. So the first draft is really important for you because it takes all the anxiety out of the process. And then I start just making it better, and also start making it more coherent. You know, when you start thinking about how one word that you use in the first chapter somehow can impact something that you're saying in the last chapter, and you start like rearranging everything in that sense. I remember many years ago, I read an interview, or maybe it was a piece that Garcia Marquez wrote, and he was saying that when he was reviewing when I was came to the Korea, what's it called in English, slogan, the color, I guess. And he saw that he was describing the breast of a woman, and he was saying pechos atónitos. How would that be in English? Pechos atónitos, like startled breast. And he told himself, because he was not a honest man, he would say like, wow, this is genius. And he decided that he was not going to use that attitude in the rest of the book. And he went again from the beginning just to take it out if he had ever used that attitude. And that's what I mean in the sense of making it coherent, that even small details can impact the rest of the book. You know? And so that is something that I like about it. But in short, I would say that I try to have a good first draft, and then I try to work organically.
You say slow. How long does that take?
With both books, I would say that what takes me more time is to think about it. What I do is I take a lot of notes and I accumulate the notes. I make long lists of words that I like for any reason. Sometimes I just read a word in a notebook, or I hear a word when I'm on the bus, or I read a word when I'm on Twitter and I write it down. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. But eventually, everything starts coming together. And so I would say, for instance, with times, I spent maybe like 3 years thinking about it. And then I wrote the whole thing in 10 months, something like that. Which is not a long time, but it's a really short. And with transmigration, it was something very similar, like 8 to 9 months. But by that point, I already had not a really clear plan. What I do is I make a plan, what I want to write. But that plan is there only to be disobeyed. You know? The plan works more as a general direction than as a Google Maps set of instructions. You know? It's the plan gives you a sense, or at least it gives me the sense of what are the dramatic imperatives that I'm going to follow, what are the poetic principles, what I know that has to happen in each chapter in general terms. But once you start writing, you start discovering new things when you start doing it, and so it just becomes a general guide, not a. You shouldn't become hostage of your plans. That's what I would say. The planning is really important, but you shouldn't become hostage of yours.
Share with us some of the writers who have been a source of inspiration throughout your life?
That's a list that is constantly changing, you know. But I can tell you several. There is the Catalonian, how do you say it in English? Catalonian writer Herrera, who wrote a really beautiful book called La Plaza de Delgado, which in English I think it's called The Time of the Globes. And it's just the story of a woman during the Civil War in Spain and the years after. It's a very painful novel. It makes you feel the horrors of war. There's a lot of death in the novel. And what is extraordinary is that there is not one single shot in that novel. You'll never see that kind of violence. And this is something that I have been trying to learn from her. How do you convey pain and violence without doing the pornography of pain and violence? And she does it in a really elegant way, but also not lacking emotion, not lacking intensity. And that is really amazing for me. For a long time, for me, the American noir novelists were the most important influence in my life. Wayne Chandler, and especially Delgado, because I thought that they had a precision when choosing adjectives, and a certain dryness when talking when describing action that I really tried to learn from. And then there is this medieval text. I don't want to call it a play or a novel because it's like a hybrid thing from the 15th century called La Celestina, which is translated into English. And when I encourage people to read it, I tell them it's like Pulp Fiction in the 15th century, because it has everything in there. It has a lot of sex and drugs and killings and magic, and it's written as a play, but it's not possible to do it as a play because it's really long and it doesn't follow the rules of the play. So but it's also not a novel, and that I like a lot. There is another book that is called Cartucho. It would be translated as cartridge. And I'm pretty sure it's related in English, but I wouldn't know exactly where it's published, by a Mexican writer called Nelly Campobello. And she wrote this book maybe in the 40s or 50s. And the thing is, the Mexican novel of the revolution is very much like a monument, the novel of the revolution. And it's a male thing. And it's just about these heroic, terrible figures bleeding in the war. And then Campobello wrote, years after the revolution, her experiences during the revolution in Chihuahua as a kid, as a children, and that is an amazingly beautiful book because she describes the soldiers and the dead people during the revolution not as these heroic figures or as monsters, but as kids, which is what soldiers always are, you know. Politicians send kids to die, and we just think of them as these either terrible monsters or these heroic men, and they are kids that they don't know what they're doing. And she looks at them with such tenderness. It's something almost I don't know what's the adjective, but let me tell you one scene is that there's a shootout outside her house, and this is in Chihuahua, so there has been snowfall, and eventually she comes out, and the blood of this soldier has become ice, and she feels bad that he's literally losing that blood, even though he's dead. So she takes that piece of ice, that's blood, and puts it back in his pocket because she doesn't want him to go away without his blood. And I thought that it was such a beautiful thing, you know? And she has many scenes like that, where she's talking about the war, but she's trying to see it from a different perspective. So anyway, I can keep talking a lot about the books that not so much that have influenced me, but that I would like to be influenced by. Because we can say whatever, I can say that Shakespeare have influenced me, but also The Simpsons, it's more likely that have influenced me. So what I can say is I love those books, and I would love that those books are made true. I have more things to say about The Simpsons. Science fiction is another thing that has been really important for me. That's since I was a kid. And I have a book coming out in November. That is the first time I will have a book that is science fiction short stories, which is something that made me really happy because this is how I started writing about Martians and monsters. And so even though it's a book that would look less ambitious than this sort of novels, I'm really happy about it because I have always thought about science fiction as in many ways one of my main influences. Because for many reasons, I think science fiction is the most political of genres. It takes certain aspects of reality and develops them to an extreme so that we can see something about a world that we are not seeing clearly, and I think science fiction does it. I just remember that I'm coming to another book.
Line 30. commentary about that.
Well, before writing John Migration, I have thought a lot that one promising scenario in which to place a story was an epidemic. And this has to do with the way in which I understand how characters are treated. For me, a character is more than a list of measurable features. It's not how much you weigh, or how tall you are, or how old you are. But for me, it's about how you react in the face of emergency. And we are facing emergencies every day. It's just that we decide not to see them. Poverty, and violence, and many other things. But just as a simple example, right? A tiger suddenly comes in here. The way each of us would react to that would define us much better than how tall we are or what degrees we have. If I just decide to pull someone from there and throw her in front of the tiger so that I would meet her instead of me, that would define it. If someone would just start crying, or someone would take a pen and try to kill the tiger with the pen. You know, this is the thing. And I thought that a city under an epidemic would be, in that sense, a great space in which every character really has to show what they are made of. And it also worked for me to talk about the way I was looking at the Mexican reality, in which going out in the streets was not anymore a simple thing, but it was always a sort of dangerous thing, just to do the most simple things, especially in certain cities, and how you would start fearing your neighbors. Or pretty much, as it happens in New Orleans, you didn't want to be close to a policeman, you know. And when I came to New Orleans, I felt totally ready to be here because I have lived in Mexico City and I have lived in Ciudad Juarez, you know. And I said, like, no, yeah, I know what kind of spots I have to stay away from. And but that is something that you have to learn, what you have to fear, because at some point when you have convinced yourself that there is such a thing as a normal way of living, then you suddenly realize you don't know what you have to feel when things are changing. I have nothing else to do with it. I'm already done. I'm fine.
I have one more question,
Yes.
maybe we'll wrap it up. I was wondering what the worst piece of writing advice you've ever gotten was.
The worst piece of writing?
Advice.
Oh. That's pretty hard. But I received a lot of that I have given.
Well, either.
You know, there's one of those rules among journalists in the Spanish-speaking world that you never use gerundio in the first paragraph. What gerundio would be the equivalent of the verbs ending with ing, you know? And that is something that also a lot of people who write literature take in face value. You know? But you never use that in the first paragraph. And I always thought that was incredibly stupid, because you should be able to do whatever you want, and it's not about, if you don't use it, it's not going to make better your writing. it's just going to make it more formulated. And now that I'm thinking about formulate things, I have a problem with people who define, well, not a problem, it's just that I don't share, with writers that define in a militant way themselves as realists, assuming that there is a realist way to talk about reality. And I think that's a really, really big mistake. Because if you assume that there is only one hardcore, honest, realist way to talk about what is happening out there, what you are really doing is that you are just repeating certain formulas that someone created before you regarding how to talk about the hard facts of life. And what literature can give you, what literature offers readers and authors is the opportunity to create new names for things and to talk about everyday fortunes and misfortunes in different ways. You know? So I would say that the worst advice is to follow advice blindly. You know? And this is my problem with the way in which sometimes they try to teach you how to write in anything. They say you have to learn that craft in the sense that there is a very specific way in which you are going to become a writer. The technical part of it is important, but the technical part is just a mechanical thing. So maybe I'll wrap it up with just sentence. Last year I went to Cuba to a writers' conference in the public library. It's a really nice space. And I was there talking with, it was several writers. One of them was a writer from Norway that writes noir and thrillers. And he was saying that for him, the most important thing, and the piece of advice that he always gives, is that you have to do a lot of research because you have to get all the details right. And this is something that comes from journalism, and it's really useful. If you want to talk about a bar, you have to go to the bar and see how it smells, and what kind of things are reading in the bathroom, and what kind of faces the barman is doing, and what kind of music. You have to get all the details. And I agree that is important. But what I said is that for me, it's more important to get your nightmares. The details anyone can get. You go there and do the notebook and write it. But how you convey that while at the same time you're talking about something really intimate, and through that intimate thing, you're talking about your society and you're talking about your time. That is, for me, the difficult part. How to get your nightmares right, because your nightmares are a product of everyday reality. And I would say that is my problem with the realist, that in order to talk about reality, you don't have to necessarily just talk about that very specific, concrete details, because every single thing you imagine is just a product of reality. I don't know if it's a good way, a dramatic way to engage. If there's nothing else. Thank you very much.
Thank you.